Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch on this Martin Luther King Day. I'm Wendy Griffith. Today, Republicans gearing up for their investigations into President Biden's classified documents scandal, as still more material showed up over the weekend, and the GOP also looking into how the Justice Department has handled the case. The number of COVID deaths exploding in China since it lifted restrictions. How might that affect the U.S.? Business, government, and media leaders from, as I said, business, government, and media meeting in Jerusalem to talk about how strengthening relations between Israel and its neighbors is important. The U.S. and Europe also factoring in there, and thinking about getting an electric vehicle. They definitely have their downsides, like not being able to drive as far as you'd like without getting a charge. And are they really energy efficient?
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And we begin in Washington, where House Republicans are ramping up investigations into the classified documents found at President Biden's home and former office, as another set of classified material was found over the weekend. Now, even some Democrats are admitting that Biden's mishandling of documents might be a threat to national security. Our Dale Hurd has the story.
Congressional Republicans want to know who visited Joe Biden's home in Wilmington, Delaware, after the White House acknowledged Saturday that a third set of classified material has been discovered. In a letter, the incoming head of the House Oversight Committee demanded the White House turn over all information related to its searches uncovering classified documents at the Biden home, as well as the visitor's log to the residence, stating President Biden's mishandling of classified materials raises the issue of whether he has jeopardized our national security.
My concern is that the special counsel was called for, but yet hours after that, we still had the president's personal attorneys who have no security clearance still rummaging around the president's residence looking for things. We want to know the visitor logs to the residence. We want to know who had access.
The House Judiciary Committee is also launching its own probe into how the Department of Justice has handled the case.
Congress has an independent constitutional obligation to oversee all aspects of the Justice Department, and that includes special counsels as well.
Even the outgoing chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Democrat Adam Schiff, says national security may have been jeopardized by Biden's mishandling of classified documents.
We have asked for an assessment in the intelligence community of the Mar-a-Lago documents. I think we ought to get that same assessment of the documents found in the home of President Biden.
Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow called the development embarrassing, but accused Republicans of trying to make political hay.
This is the kind of thing that the Republicans love. Let's talk about investigations. Let's create chaos.
Republicans accuse the Justice Department of a double standard in the way Democrats have been treated compared to the raid on Donald Trump's residence last year.
Clinton mishandles classified information, they get certain. Biden mishandles classified information, they get treated a certain way, and then of course President Trump gets his home raided 91 days before this midterm election.
Democrats claim the difference is the Biden team handled the discovery of the classified material properly, while saying Trump's lawyers stonewalled federal investigators for months. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Turning now to the economy. Although inflation has been slowing down, if you've been to the grocery store lately, you know some food prices have still been going up, in some cases way up. The cost of a dozen eggs has more than doubled in the last year. Among the reasons, a lingering outbreak of bird flu, along with soaring costs for feed, fuel, and labor costs.
So I think across the board, people are experiencing sticker shock, and eggs have not been immune to sort of the factors at play that have really factored into the increased price right now. You know, inflation, supply chain challenges, and of course, we are dealing with some bird flu, which is affecting prices as well.
Despite the sharp rise in prices, many people are sticking with eggs.
I think just comparatively to other forms of protein, I mean, they're quick to make. I can put them in my kids' lunches. They both eat hard-boiled eggs, so that's a big factor for me. And everybody in my family eats them, so that's why I continue to buy.
For a while, I just stopped eating eggs because they got more expensive. But since they're my favorite food, I came back to them in the end.
Amen. I can't live without eggs. Well, there is some good news. Analysts believe egg prices will drop in the weeks ahead. One reason demand drops off after the holidays because people aren't baking as much. Well, in China, the government said Saturday it had revised its official death toll from COVID, now saying nearly 60,000 people had died since it lifted COVID restrictions on December 7th. The previous official number of deaths since that date was just 37. COVID spread in China could have implications for other countries as well. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports on what China's COVID crisis could mean here at home.
A new wave of travel restrictions are in effect for passengers flying in from China. Anyone 2 years and older must now provide airlines with a negative COVID test result taken no more than 2 days before departure.
Given the fact that we don't have clear data about how much COVID is circulating in China and what variants are circulating, I'm not surprised that the CDC has taken these additional steps to keep the United States protected.
Italy is performing genomic testing on travelers arriving from China to hopefully learn what variant is circulating there. The U.S. is considering testing wastewater from international aircraft for the same purpose. However, Dr. David Dowdy, an epidemiologist and professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, says he doesn't believe a new variant should be a major concern.
Even with this surge, I'm sure that in January, China is not going to account for the majority of the world's COVID-19 transmission. This is something that's happening around the world, and these every time the virus is transmitted, it gets a chance to mutate.
Dowdy believes the biggest flaw in Beijing's zero COVID reversal is failing to mandate vaccinations before removing restrictions. He also maintains the world's biggest focus should be on humanitarian aid, as China's death toll is skyrocketing.
We're talking about a country that has more than 4 times as many people as the United States, and this wave is going across the entire country at lightning speed, when a lot of people have not been vaccinated or ever seen this virus before. And so this is COVID mortality on a scale we haven't seen globally since last winter.
I also spoke with China military expert Brad Bowman with Freedom for Defensive Democracies. He says that while there's also not much information on how this surge is affecting China's military, he assumes it's having a similar impact to what hit the U.S. military during the worst days of the pandemic. That would involve canceled training exercises, delayed deployments, and a slowdown in the development and production of new weapons and equipment. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Caitlin. Another step forward for the man who millions of people prayed for, Buffalo Bills defensive back Damar Hamlin. He visited with teammates at the Bills facility on Saturday for the first time since being discharged from a Buffalo hospital. His visit came just 12 days after he went into cardiac arrest and needed to be resuscitated on the field during a game in Cincinnati. Bills linebacker Matt Milano posted a photo on his Instagram account of a smiling Hamlin shaking hands with a teammate. The 24-year-old Hamlin continues what doctors have called a remarkable recovery, while others have called it an answer to prayer, even a miracle. Well, coming up, an important meeting in Jerusalem dealing with the relations between Israel and its neighbors in the Middle East and the United States and Europe. We'll bring you a close-up look when we come back. Business, government, and media leaders met in Jerusalem recently to share ideas on strengthening ties between Israel, its neighbors, the U.S., and Europe. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, a number of conversations centered on the Bible.
The Jerusalem Leaders Summit aims to keep the rule of law a priority while advancing economic freedom and free trade.
While being here today is so vital and to affirm our shared values and principles, to strengthen our ties with Israel, and to address some of the core problems that we're facing.
Joel Anand Sami and his wife, Natasha Surdoch, began this gathering in 2015 to address key issues such as growing anti-Semitism and the BDS movement against Israel.
We know that over the past few years, there has been an erosion of support from the United States towards Israel. We've seen that with the rise of BDS, and in fact, 30% of registered Democrats support BDS, according to a poll from the University of Maryland.
Anand Sami and others spoke about the important history of U.S.-Israel relations.
President Lincoln then said, "Restoring the Jews to their national home is a noble dream and one shared by many Americans." And America's leaders were faithful in their support of the Jewish community.
Cheryl Chumley of the Washington Times, co-sponsor of the summit, sees a deep biblical connection as well.
Israel and America are natural allies. It's undeniable. The very foundations of America's liberties are rooted in Jewish history.
Chumley says even if support for Israel seems to be less right now, there's hope.
The good news. In America, as you are aware, the politics always change. My foreign policy starts with eyes on Israel because of my Christian belief, where God says, "Those who bless my people, I will bless. Those who curse my people, I will curse."
America was the first nation to officially recognize the Jewish state independence nearly 75 years ago. American leadership was instrumental in supporting the Camp David Accords signed by Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin.
Surdoch says all of this helped lead to the 2020 Abraham Accords.
Signing of the Abraham Accords was a historic accomplishment in bringing peoples together that have been cut off from opportunities to trade and invest between themselves and from visiting each other.
Many who spoke pointed to Jerusalem as the hub of the Middle East and the Abraham Accords.
The road to peace runs through the city of Jerusalem.
Ambassador David Friedman was U.S. ambassador here when President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the Jewish people.
Many people predicted an explosion of violence, but indeed, what resulted was an explosion of peace over the next 4 years.
Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Fleur Hassan Nahum has been involved with the Abraham Accords for the last 2 years.
Ultimately, people see Jerusalem as the core of the challenges, but I see Jerusalem as in fact the laboratory of the solutions, not just of the city, but of the country and the region.
These historic Abraham Accords may be one of the most underreported success stories of our time. We believe that more can be done and should be done through the encouragement and positive engagement of American leadership and America's allies around the world.
Surdoch says it brought the countries together against Iran, and she urged expanding the accords by reaching out to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and other Arab nations, which she believes would usher in a new era of peace, prosperity, and stability. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Julie. Still ahead, are electric cars really energy efficient? Not necessarily. 500,000 pounds of earth have to be mined to make a single electric car battery, and that's far from all. We'll take a look at the downsides of electric vehicles when we come back. The CEO of Toyota recently said it will take longer for electric vehicles to become mainstream than the media would like people to believe. And he said a silent majority in the auto industry also thinks so. Analysts also point out that EVs are not necessarily more energy efficient, and they come with unique safety risks. Brody Carter brings us this look at the downsides of electric vehicles.
Shopping for a new vehicle? There's a lot to keep in mind. Given the potential long-term investment, more car buyers are considering the environmental impact. In 2021, almost 1.5 million electric vehicles were registered to drive on the nation's highways.
They're perfectly good vehicles, have a huge utility function for people who are wealthy enough to have two cars. The second car that you can charge conveniently overnight in your garage. What's not to like?
Still, Mark Mills, a Manhattan Institute physicist, says many of these environmentally conscious drivers don't understand the amount of energy it takes to make an electric vehicle.
So the supply chain to manufacture batteries is utterly dominated by China. They have a market share in energy minerals to make batteries, roughly double OPEC's market share in oil, or if you like, put differently, 3 to 4 times our market share, United States, in oil and gas. You know, like any vehicle, you have to mine materials to make the car. You have to mine a lot more metals to make an electric vehicle than you do a conventional vehicle, by about 1,000% on average.
Mark says a single electric car battery weighs about 1,000 pounds, requiring miners to dig up about 500,000 pounds of earth just to make one battery, using giant mining machines that burn diesel oil.
All those emissions from all that energy used to dig all those materials up cause carbon dioxide to be emitted somewhere else. So when the electric vehicle is delivered to your driveway, it's already arriving with massive emissions of carbon dioxide that you eventually sort of pay off, if you like. It's kind of like an inverse mortgage by driving that instead of an internal combustion engine.
Skip Bowman from Texas has been driving electric cars since Toyota released the Prius.
Never go back to a regular car. It's just the fun of driving the car. I've had Porsches in the past. I had Alfa Romeo. I had Mazda RX-7s. I love the thrill of having that acceleration, and there's nothing that can beat an EV.
For people like Skip, this is a perfect fit, although he points out some challenges people need to know before buying electric.
If you live in an apartment or condo or someplace that does not have a charger for you to charge overnight, then that's an issue with electric cars.
And knowing where to charge your car could become a problem given the nation's overall lack of charging stations. Of the 56,000 in North America, the majority are only found in major metropolitan areas.
That's called range anxiety, and there is range anxiety, especially if you go into the smaller areas of the state, like not the big cities.
And charging an EV has become a well-documented nightmare for drivers seeking adventure or just some R&R. Some report spending more time charging than they did sleeping.
Even the so-called superchargers, they take half an hour to 40 minutes to refill your battery, so to speak. That's almost 10 times longer than it takes to fill a conventional gasoline tank. So what that means, in very simple terms, is if you want it to have the equal function, equal utility, for convenience when you're driving on the road, you need a roughly 5 to 10 times more filling stations for the electric vehicles than you have for the gasoline vehicles.
The federal infrastructure law seeks to change this, with a goal of 500,000 new stations and plans for one every 50 miles on major highways. That will take time and money, however, to the tune of $5 billion over the next 5 years.
The United States' grid is not that strong. We're trying to maneuver off of coal and natural gas and just go with renewables, which has not proven to be completely dependable.
Another concern along these lines will be felt with falling temperatures.
The big downside of having an electric car is wintertime. The range is cut way back because the battery pack is now having to run a heater, and that heater really cuts down on your range.
If you're still interested in buying one, Kelley Blue Book estimates the typical EV costs roughly $56,000. That means only 36% of the U.S. population can likely afford one.
From the affordability standpoint, EVs are typically more expensive, and we definitely don't want to put low-income buyers out of the market.
The Biden administration hopes to sweeten the pot, promising a $7,500 tax credit if you buy a new electric vehicle.
The cost of the cars are expensive. There's no denying it. They are coming down.
One other noticeable came to light recently in Florida following Hurricane Ian. Some EV owners discovered salt water doesn't mix well with lithium-ion batteries, as cars caught fire due to saltwater damage. Junkyards filled with saltwater damaged cars shows gas-powered cars squeezed together and electric cars spaced far apart in case one catches fire. Firefighters say it takes about 1,000 gallons to put out a normal car fire, and 10 times that for an electric vehicle.
The safety implications are the fact that these batteries get hot. They get hot when they're stored, not just when they're charging, just when they're sitting there stored. They combust. And, you remember, Chevy had the Volt. They had to pull them off the road. Why? because too many of them were spontaneously catching fire.
Florida's chief fire marshal is calling for action, even writing a letter to Elon Musk. So far, Musk has not responded. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration did answer, saying lithium-ion battery fires have been observed rapidly igniting and igniting several weeks after battery damage occurred.
Now, again, there's a lot of promise in these technologies for the long run, but we are reaching a point where the policies haven't always kept up with the technologies. I mean, so many of our regulations to keep cars safe are based on how cars always used to be. We need to make sure that they're based on how cars are going to be.
The push towards electric vehicles is becoming a political red line. Some states even banning the sale of gas-powered vehicles. California making it an executive order. Still, only 1% of vehicles on the roadways today are EVs. But at the government's level, they're hopeful to push this technology sooner than you think, which is why it's so important to take all sides into consideration and purchase what's best for you. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Great story. Thanks, Brody. Coming up, a Christian customer brings about a blessing for an 82-year-old veteran retiring from Wal-Mart. We'll tell you what he did when we come back. Stay tuned. And finally, a GoFundMe campaign raised $100,000 to help an 82-year-old Walmart worker retire well. Customer Rory McCarty felt called by God to take action after meeting Butch Marion in the checkout line. With Marion's blessing, McCarty started a fundraiser for him in December, and donations poured in. So when the 82-year-old Navy veteran clocked out for the very last time, guess what? He had $100,000 in hand, a check for $100,000. The Good Samaritan McCarty tells CBN News his Christian faith inspired him to change someone else's life for the better. I love that story. That is what we should all be doing. Well, that's it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime. We're online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen today. You can email us at newswatch@cbn.com. From all of us here at CBN, have a great day, and God bless you.